everybody. Welcome. As we prepare now for the 27th Sunday. And if you attend St. Teresa here in beautiful downtown Bellevue, we'll be celebrating as well the feast day of our patroness, St. Therese. Teresa, I prefer the French name, Therese. And so the focus will be on the life of this great saint. Well, let's read from the Gospel this coming Sunday. And Pharisees came up in order to test him and asked, "Is it lawful for a man to divorce his wife?" He answered them, "What did Moses command you?" They said, "Moses allowed a man to write a certificate of divorce and to put her away." But Jesus said to them, "For your hardness of heart he wrote you this commandment. But from the beginning of creation, God made them male and female. For this reason a man shall leave his father and mother and shall be joined to his wife, and the two shall become one flesh. So they are no longer two, but one flesh. But therefore God has joined together, let not man put asunder." Well, in the house, the disciples asked him again about this matter, and he said to them, "Whoever divorces his wife and marries another commits adultery against her. And if she divorces her husband and marries another, she commits adultery." And they were bringing children to him that he might touch them. The disciples rebuked them. But when Jesus saw it, he was indignant and said to them, "Let the children come to me. Do not hinder them, for to such belongs the kingdom of God. Truly I say to you, whoever does not receive the kingdom of God like a child shall not enter into it." He took them in his arms, he blessed them, laying his hands upon them. So we have two Gospels, really. One dealing with the question of marriage and divorce, and then Jesus' affection for children. It's sort of apropos because this weekend I mentioned we're speaking about St. Therese, who believed in the way of a childlike simplicity. And so this gospel really fits. And so they're bringing children to Jesus for him to touch him, and the disciples rebuked him. And that Jesus became indignant. Often when we talk about Jesus getting angry, we remember the clearing of the temple. There, Jesus displayed a temper. But this is another example, maybe perhaps not as, quote, violent as clearing the table, throwing tables aside, but he became indignant. He came out angry that they were chasing the children. Now, there's two things about children. As we read this one, we have this, well, children are simple, innocent, and welcome them. That's part of it. But also at the time of Jesus, children were little spies. That's right. When the families would send the children and find out what so-and-so was doing. I guess they were small, they can wiggle in, sneak in, sometimes be unnoticed. So that's what they did. Children would go and find out and go back and tell whoever sent them out, either parents or some authorities. So children, like you had to be wary of them, like what is their purpose? But in this case, it doesn't seem that they were there spying on Jesus. If they were, Jesus says, "You know what? I have nothing to hide. I don't care what they hear, what I have to say. Let them tell people. Let them report me. For what I say is public." So that's really also part of it. And those who do not receive the kingdom of God like a child shall not enter it. The child is totally dependent on their family, their parents, their care for them. So we must be dependent on God and God's grace. We must be simple as a child, as St. Therese, our founder, in a little way. All right. So now let's look at the first part of this gospel. It's a tough one. Most of us try to avoid it because it's widespread. And the Pharisees were one of the most strict of all the various sects of Jews in the first century. They lived according to the tradition of the elders, and they lived according to a kind of a priestly purity. And one of the debates within the Pharisees was over what legitimate grounds for divorcing one's wife. All right? What grounds? What can I, legally permissible to divorce my wife? And there were different opinions of that. Okay? So there were certain Pharisees who appeared to have a school known as the school of Rabbi Shammai. And Rabbi Shammai was a stricter group, and his disciples said that in order to divorce someone's wife, she had to be guilty of some kind of sexual infidelity or adultery. That's the grounds. Rabbi Shammai said, okay, divorce is some sort of sexual infidelity or adultery. Now, there was another school of thought, disciples of Rabbi Hillel, who lived in the 1st century A.D., about the same time as Jesus, and they were far, far more open about divorce. In fact, Rabbi Hillel says that if your wife burned your dinner, that's right, if she burned your dinner, if you just overcooked it, then that was legitimate grounds for putting her away, for divorcing her. Wow. So we have two, far apart, far apart as perhaps can be. One for infidelity, the other one, I know, she didn't dust. I don't know anything you say. And really, is any grounds. Well, so they're really asking now, Jesus, what is, what's allowed, what isn't allowed? What are the legal grounds? Because you see this wide chasm. Anyways, the book of Deuteronomy, which is attributed to Moses, and in Moses chapter 24, verse 1, Moses gives legal permission to the Israelites to divorce their wives. It was the first permission ever given to Israelites to allow divorce, and it's found in Deuteronomy 24. And so now we see what happens. So Jesus is dealing with this dilemma for them. Now notice, there is no divorce courts or judges. Basically, you simply wrote up a written document, gave it to your wife, and she was expelled from the home, which really would put the wife in a terrible position, by the way. Women had no power. They depended on the men in their life. First would be the husband, well, first be the father, of course, but then the husband, and hopefully if they had a son. So if you're divorced, no husband, and you had no son, life would be very, very difficult. And so Jesus talks about Genesis chapter 2, where leave their father and mother and they become one. And Jesus explains it's because Moses did this, not because he really wanted to, it's because of the hardness of your heart that Moses allowed the Israelites to divorce their wives and send them out of their homes if they find any indecency. But in the beginning, God's plan, marriage is indissoluble. For what God joined, no one must put asunder. Wow. Anyway, so the disciples hear that, and wow, they're taken aback. What? They're thinking, we can't? And so what they do when Jesus leaves the crowd, they get him in the private home, and they're, okay, Jesus, come on. You really didn't mean that, did you? You couldn't be serious. What exactly, can we? Clarify your teaching, or maybe walk back a little bit, all right? Take it back. Soften it slightly. And to their, I guess, almost shock and maybe disappointment, Jesus doesn't do that. He doesn't back off. He doesn't lighten it, soften it. So when they asked him about this divorce in private matters, he said, whoever divorces his wife and marries someone else commits adultery against her. Wow. Wow. Whew. This deals a lot of soul searching, doesn't it? I mean, who perhaps in any family, maybe yourself, say, what do I do? Yeah, it's more than a few minute discussion here. More than a few minutes discussion here. But unfortunately, I don't know if you agree or not, but we now enter marriage with the idea, well, if it doesn't work out, we split up. We split up. First, you have to approach marriage with this is the intent and the commitment that we will not divorce. For every marriage has reason for divorce. Every marriage, you can find a reason to divorce. You get married for years, there's always, there's uphill, downhill, there's always struggles. And what keeps people together is not so much even the, quote, the love they feel, it's the commitment they made. It's the commitment. And sometimes that's all you have. You got to weather through it. Now, of course, no one, I'm saying, should go through abuse. But we really need to look at hard and take these words to heart what Jesus teaches us. That what God has joined, no one must ever divide. turned off?